Glebe 2050, in the eyes of Jane Jacobs, would be another failed city. By her definition, the conditions for city diversity are unrealised. Instead of mechanisms that generate diversity in Glebe, the exact opposite occurred between 2021 and 2060. The socio-political decision to separate displaced groups of people by their own cultural identity is now considered condescending. It creates high-density areas that remove vibrant city life and provokes tensions within constricted space. Over the last 30 years, we can visibly see the relationship and its urban outcomes between the systematic physical placement of people and its pushback, most famously by a man known only as Smith, who constantly poked holes in this ruling. Looking back, Smith's drive to implement what Hakim Bey defined as temporary autonomous zones throughout Glebe. What started as a small public hacks of city instruments developed into an overall goal to establish a more permanent autonomous zone that covered Glebe. On Wednesday, June 10, 2065, the Sydney City Times published the shocking images of Detective Tim's apartment, which at the time was a crime scene for his very own death. These images have reignited the search for Smith's identity, as never before seen evidence of the detective's endings are scattered throughout his residence, including Smith's artefacts and inspirations behind his city hacking that spanned over 3 decades. This journalistic report analyses these 3 leaked images of the apartment and looks at some of Smith's inspirations as well as Detective Tim's leaked police report from 2050. The new leaked images of Detective Smith's crime scene, a man who spent his life trying to identify Smith, reveals never before seen evidence of his efforts and newfound insight into who Smith might have been. We have always known Smith attempted to exploit cracks in the power of the spectacle, grounded in the gap between the map and the territory. A map or other representation is never a perfect representation of the territory. It always simplifies and leaves things out. There are spaces where chaos can re-emerge, where Smith can practice autonomy without being represented. The atmospheres of the city can be broken down into moments and can be seen within the history of the city. New planes of existence, of public domain, emerge as the symbiotic relationship between Smith and his chasers clash back and forth. Some of Smith's inspirations come from material like Porous, a manual by an unknown author. This never-before-seen document explains how over-surveillance and public rebellion are in a symbiotic relationship that constantly and exponentially intensify together. It has become clear that no matter the extremity of oppression placed upon people, there will always be opportunities to undermine these systems. Porous strives to show invisible opportunities in the urban realm at various scales, planes, dimensions, and networks. The 2050 Detective Report. From these findings, we now know Smith is an elderly man that was kicked out of his social housing block in Waterloo in 2025. His assumed motive is to seek revenge by undermining the very governance that displaced him in Glebe. Smith journeys through a network of stealth buildings, ruinous landscapes, ghost architectures, anomalies, glitches and sprites, leaving his mark subtly on the city in various forms like markings, distractions, distributions, artifacts, microarchitectures, and other secret systematic movements of knowledge. Smith believes there needs to be significant collaboration in order to create a grassroots power system that could displace the current order and build one that he deems fair. Building the power necessary for serious contest, in turn, would require that these groups of people, disbanded throughout different housing blocks, collaborate extensively to create an ever more expansive network of diverse peoples and political modes. To do this, Smith is the connection within a self-established smart grid that interweaves diverse powers and groups, and responsibly draws on the distinct proclivities of these sources to overcome their inherent limitations enforced by the Sydney City Government. With dramatic improvements in transport systems, first the metro and now the maglev highways in 2030, Smith uses these as message carriers, spreading his communication along various planes. This hacking and punking of existing movements of the city to his advantage goes relatively unnoticed, but aligns groups with a collective message. Like Peter Greenaway's STEPS project, Smith shows a way through. His distributed microarchitectures are not only a beacon that pave a path, but are physical instruments. This confusing relationship between the artifact, the user, and the urban setting enables Smith to have a control over various groups' movements and their interactions with each other. As part of these physical punkings of everyday urban systems, Smith introduces his own everyday objects that can't be registered as indifferent. These tend to take the form of public benches, street light poles, or doors. By adding these instruments, Smith gains an element of power by controlling public congregation and circulation. What started as conflicting groups from various backgrounds, displaced in an ordered pattern, is now starting to crumble into an autonomous socio-political grid at the hands of an unknown agent. Sydney City's limitations are, geometrically speaking, a line without thickness, and in urban terms, a street without penetrable gaps. Smith splits streets and cities in two, acquires thickness and contains objects in penetrable spaces. Like Smith's door and bench instrument, the gap can be experienced as an entrance threshold. The invisible potential geometries of the city can be manipulated in the archetypal elements. The perimeter wall, a series of skins, and a set of field conditions. Smith's distribution of micro-artifacts punctures and resews these layers. He provides an inscription of the invisible city, a legacy that surpasses his and Detective Tim's death.